now, this first on Fox Business, a bombshell new report reveals the Biden administration is using taxpayer money to wage a covert war on conservatives and Christian groups. The Media Research Center, a conservative watchdog group, obtaining documents showing DHS, Department of Homeland Security, is using a program meant to fight terrorists.
So I just want to pause that right there. So what's interesting about this, so basically what you have is some infighting. They released this report today, said that so basically you have the left-wing Nazis and the right-wing Nazis in America. They're going at each other. So you're about to see a civil war in the United States, right? And the left-wing Nazis, led by, the Democrats, Joe Biden, the neo-Nazis. So when they say they are liberals or neoliberals, that's code for neo-Nazis. So the neo-Nazis in the United States, and you have to understand, like, the difference between the two groups, right? So what is the difference between the two groups? The two Nazi groups. So in World War II, well, let's go back to World War II. So what do we see? What we see now manifested in Ukraine is a manifestation of what happened in World War II, or an extension, part 2, which is World War III, right? And so what did you have? You had the left-wing Nazis fighting the right-wing Nazis, right? And so, which is very weird and very disturbing, but it has to be understood so that you understand what's happening now with Ukraine and Russia in World War III, right? So what happened? Because my grandfather fought in World War II. My great grandfather fought in World War I, and my grandfather fought in World War II, right? Which doesn't really make sense if you're black. But anyway, so in World War II, where my grandfather was stationed in the South Pacific, and they so-called fighting the Asian Nazi, right, coalition, and so they were fighting the Axis, which was Japan, Germany, etc., right, Italy, and so this was the right-wing Nazi coalition, right, and then you had the Americans, the British, the French, etc., right. The Russians, etc. So this will be considered your more left-wing Nazi coalition, right? Now, and so my grandfather fought for America. At the time, my grandfather lived under Jim Crow, right? I'm not going to explain to you, if you're a fucking idiot, I'm not going to explain to you what Jim Crow is. Now, so, which made no sense. How could you be fighting for freedom for people in, the South Pacific or in Germany when you live under Jim Crow as a black man, right? It's like Hawkeye said in the Avengers, I'm fighting aliens with bows and arrows. None of this makes sense, right? But that's what happened. And then when he got back, they called him a nigger and said, get the fuck out of here, nigger, we'll lynch you. But I digress. Now, so these were left-wing Nazis, obviously. The difference between the left-wing Nazis and the right-wing Nazis, like Hitler, see, Hitler ran the right-wing so-called branch of the Nazis that run the global fascist order, right? And his goal is to straight exterminate. So not the difference. Let me explain something. The difference between a Nazi and a fascist, real quick. Fascism is when you have the amalgamation or combination or combining of the state political apparatus, right, governmental apparatuses, and corporations, right? Like, for instance, George Washington, was a fascist, but he was also a Nazi. So what is Nazism? Nazism is when you add a white supremacist factor to it. See? And a lot of people don't know this. They'll just say, you're a Nazi, you're suppressing my freedom of speech, or you're a fascist, and they don't have any idea what they're talking about, obviously. So, and by that definition, which is the only definition via the dictionary, George Washington would be considered a Nazi. You see? So America was the original Nazis. America and Ukraine, places like Ukraine, gave birth to Adolf Hitler. He spun off from places like America and Ukraine. These were the birthplaces of Nazism. Now, and so when Hitler spun off his so-called right-wing Nazism, their goal is extermination of all non-white people. So the difference between left-wing Nazis and right-wing Nazis is the left-wing Nazi believes in enslaving non-white people and for sex and for labor, and then killing them and things like that. The right-wing Nazi believes in extermination, no procreation, no sexual. They believe in like building robots, like Elon Musk. You see, they believe in building robots for labor and things like that. They believe in robotics, automation, and extermination. You see, that's the difference between left wing and right. So I'm gonna play this story, but you had, I want to preface this with some understanding on what is going on in the world, right, in news, because they're not gonna tell you, the whole story. I'm gonna tell you the whole story. And so that's how fascism and Nazism work. It's two wings of the same bird. So you have the left wing Nazi, which is the fascist, which is kind of Nazism light, right? And then you have the Hitler wing. One wants to enslave you for sex and labor and fun, and then kill you. And then one wants to just exterminate you. And we don't need black slaves. We'll make robots or whatever. We don't need, Indian or indigenous, slaves. We'll make robots and just wipe them out. You see, that's how that works. That's Nazism and fascism. But anyway, so right now you have, and so I'm sorry. Let me make that point. So what you saw in World War II was Hitler got out of control. And he was a right wing. He spun off from America and Ukraine, and he decided his Nazi branch, which would be considered right wing, decided to start the extermination process earlier than they wanted to. That's the only problem. That was their only problem with Hitler. Let's be clear. And he attacked the Zionist wing of the Nazis. So it was a bunch of white supremacists infighting, right? You had to read between the lines what I'm saying. He attacked the Zionist wing of the Nazis. He attacked the Zio-Nazis. You understand that? Look it up. AKA the Holocaust, right? And so you had a bunch of Nazi infighting, and he racialized the Zio-Nazis wing, right? He racialized them and tried to paint them as non-white to whip up a fervor to attack within his own people. You see, his own group of white people. You see, it was just it was just a ploy. You see. And so that set off the war. That set off World War II. Because they were like, listen, the left wing of the Nazi fascists were like, yeah, listen, we don't want to exterminate the slaves yet. We don't want to exterminate all of these so-called non-white people yet. We don't think it's time. And Hitler decided it was. And then that sparked the fight of world, and that sparked World War II. You see? And so they had to bring Hitler back in. They had to bring that branch of back into the fold, and say, listen, we have a timeline. You know what I mean? We don't want you getting out of hand. You're gonna destroy the whole goddamn planet before we, execute our plans. So they had to bring Hitler back under control. All right. So therefore, that's what happened in World War II. Fast forward, now the Russians were basically opposed to the Nazis. You see, and so Nazism also, they were opposed. They were a white group, basically a Caucasoid group, right, who were opposed to that policy at a certain level, and so they were always problematic. You see, they were always problematic. So therefore, they would always had to be dealt with. You see, in the end, they knew they didn't want to do it then, but they figured they could do it down the road. But they knew that they said, listen, they're not going to play ball, so we'll have to take care of them. We'll have to neutralize the Russians at some point. We don't want to do it now. So that's led to the Cold War. Now they've come to a point where they need to neutralize the Russians. Why? Because this is a global Nazi fascist takeover, and they need to finish the game. You see, we're in the end game now, where they would like to complete the process. That means they're gonna finish where Hitler started. You see, they're moving into the extermination phase in the next, I guess, decade or so, right? So they need to get rid of anybody that's not going to play ball. That means they need to neutralize, the most formidable opponents. Africa is not formidable. The nigger in America is not a formidable opponent. He's been neutralized. He's a tranny and things like that, right? He's a Democrat and a Republican and a tranny and basically a neo-Nazi himself for the most part, right? And a bug out and a gang member or something, right? So he's not a factor. He's a total bug out, right? The African is bleaching their skin and they're running around and they're totally bugged out. The Africans are, they're not a factor, so they don't have to worry about them. What is their main concern, right? Probably China, other groups, the main stronger groups that oppose them. So that would be like China and Russia, right? So once they neutralize them, they can steamroll everybody else. You see, once they neutralize the Chinese and the Russians, who are probably the biggest opposition to, a global Nazi extermination program, right? Then everybody else is easy peasy, chicken greasy, right? So that's what's happening now. They're neutralizing their biggest opposition, and once they finish with them, they're going to steamroll the rest of the clowns, and finish where Hitler started. You see, Hitler just jumped the gun. That's all that was. You see. Now, let's get on to this story, man. Now I done broke that down. Let's get on to this story.
Which includes groups like the Heritage Foundation, MAGA, Fox News, even the Republican National Committee in the same category as Nazis. Joining me right now is Media Research Center founder and president Brent Bozell. Brent, it's great to have you this morning. We want to know more about this. Tell us what you found and this so-called pyramid of far-right radicalization.
It's an astonishing finding, Maria. There's the program called the Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention Grant Program. This is supposed to find domestic terrorists in America. It was started by Obama. There was concern by Republicans that it would be weaponized against Republicans and conservatives. Trump put the kibosh on it. It's come back now with Joe Biden. You have that pyramid. Where's that pyramid coming from? There are 80 recipients of money so far. They've received $40 million in grants. We've done FOIAs on 31 of them. The University of Dayton, none of them have wanted to respond. Here we go again. Recipients of public money won't tell the public what their money is for. The University of Dayton wouldn't give it to us. We found the documents. Anyway, look at that pyramid. This was a conference in December of 2021. In the first layer, you've got Heritage, you've got the Breitbart, you've got Fox News, you've got Christian Broadcasting, you've got the Republican National Committee. Already you've got more than half of America is on the list. The second level torques it up. More dangerous groups. Turning Point USA, Tea Party Patriots, PragerU, Breitbart, that American Conservative Unit. Then the third level is pro-Nazi organizations. And the top one is militant Nazi organizations. So there you go, the pyramid, showing the progression of domestic terrorism. But listen to this. I want you to hear this, what they were actually doing in this conference. One speaker was associating Ron DeSantis with the Holocaust.
Unbelievable.
One speaker was associating Donald Trump with Pol Pot, the genocide guy. One speaker did this. He advocated programs to deny people, to shut down their websites, to close their meetings, and to physically prevent them from assembling in public. Physically prevent them from assembling in public.
Physically, yeah.
Put it all together, and it goes on. By the way, that speaker also said, and this is a quote that we have to remember, he's a member of Antifa. He said, a lot of things we are doing are illegal. A lot of it involves breaking the law.
Yeah.
They put it all together. They wrapped it up. They sent it to the DHS, and DHS awarded them a grant of $358,000 to continue doing it.
Wow. And this is why the Republicans continue to say that this administration looks for terrorists in America, whether it's parents, going after parents because they want to know more about their kids in school, rather than going after China as an adversary. You're calling now for the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas to step down. I mean, there have been calls to impeach this guy over the border, and now this.
Well, you've got him testifying in Congress and lying through his teeth about the border. Everybody knows he's lying. All you have to do is look at the video. But now you've got this, where he's taking government funding meant to find terrorists, and he's going after Fox News. He believes, Maria, you're a terrorist. I'm a terrorist. Anybody with the RNC is a terrorist. Anyone supporting reading Breitbart, the Christian Broadcasting Network, for the love of God, the Heritage Foundation, the most...
For the love of God, indeed. I'm going to stop that right there. Everybody doesn't have the same God. So when this white man stand up here screaming about the love of God, the love of what God? You see? His God, my God are not the same. My God is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you see, whose name was changed to Israel. His God is the Antichrist, Satan, the devil, just to be clear. Right? So, but basically, I digress, but basically what you have going on is you have a group of Nazi infighting that's taking place, you see. That's all that is, right? And so now you have a group, so at the same time, like you're going to have, a civil war, right? You got basically a civil war, where a group, which is just the same thing, right? A bunch of Nazis infighting. And that's what's happening. I don't want to make this too long, but I wanted to kind of break that down. When I saw this story, I was just like, wow, Nazi infighting, civil war, they're fighting each other, and they're pointing the finger saying, those guys are not. So you got the Democrats saying, these guys are a bunch of Nazis, right? When they all are, right? From the beginning, from the rooter to the tutor, as they used to say on the farm, right? In the country, down in the country, right? They all are. That's the secret. That's the kicker. That's the rub, right? So, but the question is, right? Why would they now be standing around pointing fingers at each other, talking about, hey, I'm not a Nazi. These guys over here are a bunch of Nazis, right? You got Joe Biden, right, leading the charge, right, and calling these right-wing Nazis. Well, Joe Biden was a card-carrying member of the KKK and probably still is. He eulogized the head, high-level KKK members. He trumpeted and led segregation against blacks in America. Doesn't get any more Nazi than that in the United States, right? But yet now, fast forward 2023, Joe Biden is hunting down Nazis. Really? Oh, really? Oh, that's what we supposed to believe. Make this shit make sense, right? No, what's going on is they masters of confusion. You see? What's going on is it's starting to come out that what's going on when you look at Ukraine and Russia. And they trying to muddy the waters to confuse, particularly the Negro, right? Because they know he's easily confused, right? Very low information and easy confused, you see? So they're trying to muddy the water because of what's about to happen, you see? And they say, oh, this guy's a Nazis over here. This Trump guy, these guys over here. It's funny, the person, pointing the finger is Joe Biden and Barack Obama. That isn't even, if you know the history of Joe Biden, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Joe Biden would be considered one of the most right-wing, except by Negroes in America who voted for him 3 times. By any educated person, Joe Biden would be considered one of the most right-wing Nazi crackers that you could find in the fucking universe. Next to the Dark Lord, from Star Wars, right? But these Negroes voted for him 3 times. This shit make sense. But he's standing up calling these people a bunch of Nazis. That lets you know you're looking at the Nazi Civil War. But anyway, I'm going to leave it there. That's all I got.